Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Cambridge Insider Podcast. Your host, as always, Stephen van Niekerk out of New Jersey. Wonderful to have you all listening to us. And as always, my good friend from, I don't want to say across the pond, from across the country, Mr. Craig Batson. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic today. I'm back in my regular chipper mood. I know in our last episode, we talked a lot about the weather in our respective areas, and it is a beautiful fall day in Seattle today. So it's got me buzzing. It's a great time.
I was actually going to say that we shouldn't mention anything about the weather because I've been moaning a lot about the weather. But now that you've brought it up, it is a beautiful day in New Jersey as well. The rain's moved on, the leaves are falling, and fall is upon us. So I'm excited about that. And then we're very, very honored this afternoon to welcome to the podcast Mr. Perry Akins, the chairman of iTEP. Perry, how are you?
I'm doing fine, Stephen, and thank you very much for having me on.
It's an absolute pleasure. Just whereabouts in the country are you at the moment?
I'm actually between Santa Monica, California, and Malibu on a mountaintop overlooking the ocean. Although I'm overlooking you now at the moment.
I just for our listeners, everybody in this call just gave the best facial expression of, oh, that's where I would like to be. That is the place.
Yeah, I was gonna just say to Perry, just cut the podcast short, give one quick answer, and get back to the view. All right. Well, we do have a full list, a full schedule of questions. So let's jump right into it, Perry. So for our listeners that maybe don't know, what is iTEP? What makes it different from TOEFL, which is a very common standardized test, in particular for international high school students. So what is iTEP? What makes it different?
Well, there are, I guess, several things that make it different, and I tell you, personally, I've been in English as a second language. I don't want to say how many years, but more than 1 year. Okay. I remember when TOEFL was introduced, so that will give you some idea. And so we lived with TOEFL for many years. There's nothing wrong with TOEFL. TOEFL is a fine test. But we lived with it until about 1998 when IELTS came along, from Australia. And IELTS had something that TOEFL didn't have, and that was a speaking section and a writing section, a real one. And so we were all very pleased to see that enter the college admissions process as one of the tests that were used. So when I left ELS Language Centers, where I've been president for I think 30 years or 25 years. I consulted with them for a while, decided with a business partner that we needed to do something worthwhile. And so we decided, it's about 2005, 2006, I said, well, why don't we come up with an English language assessment test? My business partner had been in international education. I've been in international education. And we said, well, and neither one of us, personally, we didn't particularly like IELTS or TOEFL. I mean, they were too long and too expensive, we felt. I mean, this was our opinion. And so we decided there was a market for a test that was shorter, that was not as expensive, that would be internet-based, and that would include speaking, and that would include writing, and that would provide results to the colleges and high schools in a short period of time. Initially, it was 5 days, whereas today it's 24 hours. So that's what we did. That was around 2005, and here we are today. We have a variety of internet-based tests. One is for college admissions. One is for high school admissions. We have one for hospitality. So a variety of different tests, all internet-based.
And so I think that does a good job of explaining what iTEP is, and our school officials might be familiar with iTEP Slate, which is the high school admissions test that most of our students would take. Can you tell us a little bit about iTEP Slate and what went into the creation of it?
Well, this was actually probably 12 years ago or 14 years ago when we first decided to do a high school test. And we were motivated to do it by a friend that became a friend, a person I'd met in China who was working in China with high school kids. He said, we need a high school test. And I said, well, if you need one, if you're willing to buy it, then I'll produce it. And so we did. So we used the same platform, the same format as we use for the academic test. And that is included grammar, included speaking, included writing, included all the skills. So the high school test, it's very similar. The iTEP Slate or the iTEP Academic Plus are both very similar, except the vocabulary and the topics and the listening and the writing topics are all the ones for the high school test are high school are more related to 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds. So it's a very similar test. And we were lucky to be able to use the same platform. And we decided to use the same platform because the platform was working well.
And that's fantastic. And one of the things that I really find, and I've only worked in this industry for, gosh, this is probably my 6th year now, is that TOEFL, when you take the TOEFL, you have to really study for the TOEFL. You can't just take it and have it assess where your English ability is in a specific day, in a specific week. You have to spend months learning to take the test. Was this something that you thought about when creating the iTEP test?
I tell you what I thought about when creating the test, both the Slate test and the academic, was that we were not going to get into the business of test preparation. And I can tell you, I fought that battle for about 10 years and I finally lost it. And the reason is that students, whether they be high school kids or college kids, do not want to take a test that they cannot prepare for. Okay, so they have been told, they have been oriented into thinking that, and brainwashed, I would say, because testing companies make a lot of money out of test prep materials. I mean, let's face it. So I really didn't want to do it. So I was forced into it. So we came up with a test prep book, not a program, but a test prep book. And it's published in China. It was published by a publisher in China. We publish it through Amazon. It's sold over Amazon. But it's not a comprehensive test, and we don't make any money on it. It's not what we do. However, I can tell you that over and over again, we kept getting requests from people around the world. Well, what about a test prep program? What about test prep? So we just made the decision to develop a test prep program, a comprehensive test prep program, which we're in the process of doing now, that will be introduced by certainly by January of next year. But I think what students need who are taking the test, they need to become familiar with the format of the test. They need to know what to expect so that the test is not a surprise to them. But students said, look, we're going to teach you enough English that's going to make a difference on your test. Personally, I think it's ridiculous. However, as I say, we will have our test prep program and we're going to have it out there in January. Against my wishes, but it's going to be there because the customer wants it. You got to give the customer what they want.
Oh, and we've all dealt with our parents, our students. Everybody listening has had that experience. So that's fantastic. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say one of the other things, I said that our test was shorter, and it was interesting because when we decided that it would be a 90-minute test, I just decided that's enough. I could actually probably develop a test in 30 minutes, but I figure that's nobody's going to take it. Although now there is a 30-minute test, as you know, they call it Duolingo. So when we came out with our test, it was 90 minutes. And I remember going around, and it was the first comprehensive test out there other than TOEFL and IELTS. I mean, our test was. So that was about 2006. And I'd go to admissions people and they'd say, well, how long is the test? I said, well, it's 90 minutes. They said, don't you think that's too short? And I said, well, my response would be, well, do you think it should be 91 minutes? Or what about 92? You know, by then I've lost the customer. You can be assured.
Yeah.
Perry,
but I think I don't think. I mean, my personal feeling. I've been in ESL for, as I say, more than 6 years.
Yeah.
And you don't need a 3-hour test. It's not necessary.
Perry, just on that point, how do you balance somebody who has a lot of experience in the industry between what the customer wants and what perhaps is right, or what your experience tells you is the right way to develop this test and the right test to be out there?
Well, I can tell you there has to be a balance. There really does. And so you can have certain principles and say, you know, my principle is we're going to do it this way because I know that's best. I'll give you a good example. When I was with the ELS language centers many years ago, I remember we had a program that's 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. These are intensive programs. Students come from around the world to study at ELS and still do once the students start coming and the schools open up again. But we used to get requests for a conversation class. Now remember, these students are coming, they're studying 6 hours a day, they're preparing to go to college, university. After school, they can go to a movie, they can go to the supermarket. Everything's in English here in this country. They're here, I mean, generally in English. And so I would tell students, look, I'm not going to take your money for a conversation class. You want conversation? Go meet somebody. We will help you meet someone. Eventually, I had to have a conversation class because there was such a demand for it. So we set up a 1 hour of the 6 hours a day. We had 1 hour conversation. I didn't think it was necessary, but you know, the world is full of compromises. So you know, I don't like to compromise, nor does anyone like to, but we have to compromise.
That's a fantastic story. Now, one question that we are curious about is, so iTEP Slate is offered online, but is given at a test center. Is that correct?
Sort of. And I say sort of because there are no test centers today.
And that's what I was going to ask. That was my next question.
I tell you, we were at least we were ahead of the game in the fact that we had an internet-based test. So when this COVID came along, we had an internet-based test, and IELTS got caught short, I guess, because they didn't have one, and TOEFL I don't think was ready for it, but we had one. So what we did, knowing the test center was closed, we immediately put our IT team to work to provide some additional programming that would result in security, sufficient security for the person to take the test at home. So we have, this is colleges and high schools now. We've, over the past 3 months, so we've had large numbers of students taking the test at home. And what is the security? Well, if I told you, then you would tell the test taker, or you would sell that information to a test taker. But I will tell you generally what it is we take a lot of photographs, and we tell the student, you know, as you are taking the test, we don't want anybody else in the room. We want your eyes to stay on the computer, and we are going to photograph you many, many times throughout this test. So we do, you know, we have, and we grade our tests. So we have live graders. That's another thing we do that some others don't, some don't do, and that's another subject. But I prefer live graders, and our graders, they will check the film, and to be sure the student or the test taker is paying attention to the test on the computer and is not referring to a friend or there's somebody behind them or somebody behind the computer. I tell you, the students are absolutely ingenious when it comes to cheating on a test. I give them a lot of credit. And even when I was a teacher at the university, I knew students love to cheat. And because it's just sort of, I hate to say it's human nature, but students, you know, the stakes are high, you know, so I would put the students in the classroom. I would separate them far enough that it was absolutely impossible. They couldn't look on one another's papers. Of course, they didn't have computers at the time, or cell phones, or earphones that they could do. But I don't blame the student. If the student is able to cheat on our test, that's our fault. That's our problem. That's not the student's problem. So we work on that, and I can tell you we work on it all the time, because it's hard. It's hard to stay up with the students, with the test takers.
So just before Craig goes into the next question there, students, if you are listening, be aware, Perry's out there. He'll catch you. He'll find you.
You're right.
So then with COVID, everyone's taking the tests at home, and that's kind of the current state of the industry. Where do you see the testing industry going in the next, 2 to 5 years?
Well, it'll all be internet based for sure. I mean, that's so we were, I guess, 10 years ahead of everyone else, but it takes a lot of money to stay abreast in this industry. But I think it'll be all internet based, and students will be taking the test at home. They'll be taking the test on the subway or wherever they wish to take the test, an English test. But the biggest challenge always is going to be security. Are you getting decent results? Is the test secure enough?
That totally makes sense, and makes sense, kind of for the broader world. We're looking at how this new internet-based society is going to look. So that's fantastic to know. Perry, thank you so much for answering our questions today. If we had our listeners wanted to find out more about ITEP, where would they go?
Well, they would just Google ITEP, ITEP, and that'll get them there. Or they can call me. Should I give you my phone number? If they wish to make donations, they can make donations.
I don't know if giving your phone number is the wisest thing.
I'm not sure.
But donations may be online.
So I can vouch. If you search ITEP online, it will take you there. ITEPexam.com is where I was learning about it, and I've known about the test for a while. It's where I do. You can find out more about ITEP Slate there. You can take a sample test to learn about everything. I know this is one of the conversations that I have with my school officials, on a daily, weekly basis. I had somebody call me just yesterday asking, oh, what test should I be taking? TOEFL, is a little hard, but it's good. And so hopefully we can start to encourage our schools to look more at the ITEP test compared to some of the other tests that we've had around forever. And I think we all know about SLEP, which is a discontinued test that is still very popular in China. When ITEP will give you a much better view of a student's English ability.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you.
Well, Perry, thank you so much for joining us. Any final thoughts from your side as we say goodbye?
No, except, strange times for all of us here in international education, and we don't know where it's all going to end up, but it eventually will get better. I know it will. I'm an optimist. All
Absolutely. Right? We like to hear that again from the entire Cambridge Insider podcast team. Thank you so much for joining us, and it's about time you get back to that view, so enjoy.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.